Be sure to subscribe and click on the bell for notifications on future uploads. And now we come to the movies of 2021, and aside from it being a better year than the last one, there are some hybrids going on of movies being in both theaters and on streaming, which I really don't mind, as I was able to see them all in theaters. And only in theaters. I know people don't see this as a great idea, as doing so would have more people streaming it than seeing it in theaters, which, as a moviegoer, is a sad thing, as I want these films to succeed on the big screen, regardless of the critiques or anything else. And I never once stream movies when they're also in theaters, given the premium access and not having the exact streaming service and such. But at the same time, if it's done this way, then I wouldn't care, because seeing them in theaters is a way better experience than the alternative, at least to me. I watched all of Warner Bros. 2021 slate of movies on the silver screen, with the exception of Judas and the Black Messiah, which I missed out on and had to watch on DVD, as I don't have HBO Max to view them on, as I'm more in support of seeing these in the cinema than anywhere else. And a few of these movies I've seen more than once. Some were fine and some were good, but I didn't recall any one of them to be bad, and I watched them all the way through. So, on that note, let's go over these films. Let's start with the movies that I saw in theaters. The Marksman. This is an alright film of a man taking a kid across the border to safety and even bonds with. It has nice grasps on reality and decent action, except for one scene that's so out of nowhere and unrealistic that I just laughed at it. 2.5+ stars. The Little Things. This thriller tries to be in the vein of Seven and has several disturbing moments, but it ends with no such resolution and tends to go nowhere with the mystery it presents. 2.5 mixed stars. Earwig and the Witch. Studio Ghibli's first CGI film that may have the charm and wonder of its predecessors, but can't exactly come through in this form of animation, and a few things felt missing as it starts to conclude. 2.5 mixed stars. Tom and Jerry. I watched this film 2 times. This live-action animated hybrid is fun and good for its animation, jokes, and slapstick violence, yet the live-action parts are awkward and unfunny, and its story is standard and cliché. 3 stars. Nomadland. While I wanted to like it for its atmosphere, its sense of reality, and the acting, I felt somewhat uninterested as it didn't engage me enough, and it went nowhere at the end. 2.5- stars. The Father. This is quite a fine drama with neat performances and a nearly clever setup, and Anthony Hopkins did quite a good and charming role. 2.5+ stars. Billie Eilish, The World's a Little Blurry. I saw this one in IMAX. The Apple TV Plus documentary on singer Billie Eilish is an interesting look on how she works, her family life, and her fame, yet has little for me to be invested in outside of the songs that she plays. 2.5 mixed stars. Raya and the Last Dragon. I saw this film 2 times, including one in IMAX. Disney's first animated film of 2021 is okay for its action and some humor, mostly with Sisu the dragon, but its message and story becomes hammered and complex a bit much, even with no songs or villains. 2.5 mixed stars. Godzilla vs. Kong. I watched this film in IMAX. The 4th entry in Legendary Pictures' Monsterverse is alright with cool action scenes, a crazy yet fine story to follow, and spends enough time with both humans and monsters, even though the monsters are more interesting. 2.5+ stars. Nobody. This action comedy really has more action and comedy, but has good violent moments, a few funny moments, and the likes of Bob Odenkirk and Christopher Lloyd make it all fine enough. 2.5+ stars. Voyagers. A sci-fi equivalent to The Lord of the Flies, but with teens and being COVID, does different tactics from what it inspired from. Yet there's hardly much investment in how the film works and why things have to happen. 2.5 mixed stars. Fear of Rain. While it's an original film on teenage schizophrenia, with a twist that's entirely one character's fault, It isn't as interesting as Words on Bathroom Walls, as there's unlikable characters, a mystery that's not much of one, tons of blaming back and forth, and it kept going after the major twist is revealed. 2.5 mixed stars. Mortal Kombat. I watched this one 2 times, including one in IMAX. This is a near solid adaptation of the video games that's better than the 2 films from the 1990s. Yet its storyline is cliché and has some moments that could have been improved on. But the effects, look, action and gore, and some humor do kinda make up for it. 2.5 plus stars. Separation. While it might be an original horror mystery, it doesn't have as many scares as it thinks it does, and its mystery portion feels unsatisfying as it didn't leave much of an impact, even for the plot it has, which isn't anything special. 2.5 mixed stars. Wrath of Man. I watched this one in IMAX. The remake of the 2005 French film Cash Truck has lots of neat action and a small mystery with the main character, but it tends to jump around a lot with little consistency, and its ending goes on to the point that I must question why didn't it end sooner or why could no one stop it earlier. 2.5 mixed stars. Those Who Wish Me Dead. Based on the book by Michael Kurita, this thriller doesn't have any kind of suspense as the bad guys get away once too often, and its ending is quite unsatisfactory that it seems to be missing a scene or two. 2.5 mixed stars. Spiral from the Book of Saw. I saw this one in IMAX. The spin-off sequel to the Saw movies is as gory and suspenseful as the others, but despite it playing to the previous film's strengths, it comes off short with an unpackable twist ending showing the villain a little too early and some character motivations. 2.5 plus stars. Cruella. I saw this one 2 times. The latest Disney live-action remake is very mixed for me, and not in a good way. Some like the soundtrack, costume, side characters, and some backstory are fine, but Cruella herself and a mid-credit scene really took me out of it. 2.5 mixed stars. A Quiet Place Part 2. The sequel to the 2018 film presents more dialogue and exploration than the first film, but much like the first film, it isn't quite scary or intense, even when I saw it, and much character investments I have are little. 2.5 mixed stars. Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. The sequel to the 2017 Hitman's Bodyguard has about the same bit of fun and humor as the first film, but presents some twists and character insights that aren't focused enough or are out of nowhere, and even then are not as engaging. 2.5 mixed stars. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. The third entry in the Conjuring series that are loosely based on true events is once in a while interesting, but not that scary, despite an occasional jump scare moment. And much like the other Conjuring films, it didn't quite grab me as much as I wanted to. 2.5 mixed stars. Spirit Untamed. While it's more of an extended version of the first episode of the Netflix series than a sequel to the 2002 film, it doesn't really keep me interested and doesn't have any nuance to it, outside of an occasional funny bit. 2.5 mixed stars. In the Heights. Based on the musical by Lin-Manuel Miranda, this adaptation has nice choreography and good scenarios for the songs. But the songs are forgettable and there's too many characters to focus on, even with one that's so important that it feels odd to dedicate a song to, since I barely know them. 2.5 mixed stars. Peter Rabbit 2, The Runaway. The sequel to the 2018 film is not as enjoyable as the first film, as I found that one to be cute, simple, and have a decent laugh. But this one is quite all over the place, and quite literally by the end, despite it having an occasional laugh and some clever bits of commentary. 2.5 mixed stars. The Boss Baby, Family Business. I watched this one 2 times. DreamWorks' sequel to the 2017 film is more crazy and colorful than the last one, with a great and fun look, crazier ideas and gags, and more colorful visuals. But despite one character being miscast, I did find this film a bit better than the first. 3 stars. Black Widow. Originally slated for 2020, Marvel's first film of 2021 is okay. There's good action scenes and the characters are fine, but the ending and climax did feel drawn out. 2.5 mixed stars. Space Jam: A New Legacy. I watched this film 9 times. The sequel to the 1996 film is very enjoyable and fun, which is better than the original in every way, full of great animation, Warner Brother references in many corners, higher stakes, and great morals for every character, despite it following the same story beats as the original, yet in more epic ways. 3.5 stars. Old. The latest from M. Night Shyamalan is generally an okay one, despite some awkward acting and the twist ending, but it's alright for the setup, camera work, and bits of disturbing moments. 2.5 mixed stars. The Green Knight. From director David BLURRY, this medieval fantasy based on the King Arthur story of Sir Gawain has nice music, settings, and effects, but like many A24 films, it's dull, boring, and doesn't make sense to me. 2.5 minus stars. Jungle Cruise. Based off the Disney attraction, this film has the same amount of fun and action as the first Pirates film with good jokes and effects. Yet there's lots of story and characters to cover, and it feeling longer than it is. 2.5 plus stars. The Suicide Squad. I watched this one 2 times, including one in IMAX. A sequel to the 2016 film that's better than its predecessor with colorful visuals, nice edits, good use of humor, and bloody and gory action. It's not exactly a great film, but it's fun and unique. 2.5 plus stars. Free Guy. It's a fun and cool movie with great in-jokes and funny moments, and being the Truman Show equivalent to video gaming and a wondrous look into them. And while there being a nice twist with the characters. 3 stars. Respect. Based on the life of Aretha Franklin, this is another film that has the tropes associated with the rise and fall of a singer or musician mixed with some racial complications. But it doesn't go too far into them and comes off as fine, and the singing and music is wondrous. 2.5 plus stars. Don't Breathe 2. The sequel to the 2016 horror film is definitely more violent than its predecessor, but also has more story and twists with the antagonist of the original being the main lead, though 1 or 2 plot elements are questionable. 2.5 plus stars. Reminiscence. I saw this one in IMAX. This is quite an original sci-fi noir film that I kind of like, as it has decent effects and action, and a big mystery that gets complicated as it goes on, but overall, it's an alright one. 2.5 plus stars. Paw Patrol, the movie. I saw this one 2 times. The film version of the Nickelodeon TV series is an okay one for the abundance of cute animals, colorful animation, and some good jokes. But there isn't much to it unless you know the show, which I don't, yet it's fine enough. 2.5 plus stars. The Night House. On the surface, this horror drama may seem like a haunted house flick, but it goes beyond that with twist after twist about what's going on, only to have those twists not gain any fine payoff. But at least it tried. 2.5 mixed stars. Candyman. The semi-sequel / reboot of the 1992 film has a proper setup, nice twists, and decent amount of gore effects. Yet it almost went the same direction as the original, even though I prefer this one over that one. 2.5 plus stars. Demon Slayer the movie, Mugen Train. Though I never seen the anime show or read the manga, this film didn't help me much, as I not only could get into the characters that I hardly know, and the action is all meh, and all being set in one location, it has such a long and boring conclusion to any anime I have seen that I just didn't care about it at all. 2.5 minus stars. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Marvel's second film for 2021 is one I didn't get into. It sometimes felt predictable, but some of what I wanted or predicted never happened, and the action is fine, even though it wasn't grabbing me, and it ended rather disappointingly. 2.5 mixed stars. Malignant. The latest horror film from director James Wan is really good. The horror is pretty suspenseful, the effects are pretty grand and amazing to look at, And while it is disturbing in some places, with the twists and an occasional cliche, they all made sense in the end, and I had a great time with it. 3.5 stars. Cry Macho. From writer, director, and actor Clint Eastwood, this small western drama is similar in structure to The Marksman, but has a more wholesome quality, even if it felt anticlimactic in some areas. 2.5+ stars. The Eyes of Tammy Faye. Based on the documentary of the same name, this biopic on televangelist Tammy Faye Baker, of whom I only knew the name of and heard of her LGBTQ support, might be interesting if it was only made simple to understand why certain things happen, as I didn't get why. 2.5 mixed stars. Dear Evan Hansen. Based on the Broadway musical with music and lyrics by Ben Pasquet and Justin Paul, and based on the book by Stephen Levinson, this film felt so down-to-earth that the song presentations are oddly handled and is centered on a lie that feels wrong, given the subject matter. 2.5- stars. Venom, Let There Be Carnage. The sequel to the 2018 film is a neat one, with neat visuals, fun characters and effects, neat twists, and more action and comedy than the last film. Yet its short runtime doesn't give much to explore, with lots of plot details, and not being as good as the first film. But at least I had a fun time with it. 2.5+ stars. The Addams Family 2. The sequel to the 2019 movie is about as meh as its predecessor, but has a small amount of humor that I like and is weird and could be fun. But its setup is too mundane and doing tropes found in vacation and road trip movies, and is occasionally questionable. 2.5 mixed stars. The Many Saints of Newark, a Sopranos story. This prequel movie to the HBO series The Sopranos evokes elements of the Godfather films, yet has too many characters and moments for me to even care, and most of its focus is on a character that, while I'd never seen the show, might have done little in it. 2.5- stars. The Last Duel. From director Ridley Scott, this medieval drama has a fine story structure in recounting an event and features fine acting and good action. Yet it does repeat the same scenes during its retellings, and a few bits do seem off. 2.5+ stars. Halloween Kills. The sequel to the 2018 film has references to the first 3 films and a few nice kills, but it gets lost in its own roots and does stuff that has little meaning or point to them, but not too much. 2.5 mixed stars. Dune. I watched this one 2 times, including one in IMAX. While it's better than the 1984 film and is the first part of the Frank Herbert novel, this version's fine for the cast, effects, music, look, and scale, but it is too long and overglorifies its visuals in some scenes, and some where most of the dialogue is quiet, with little to a lot of detail establishing its universe. 2.5 mixed stars. Ron's Gone Wrong. I watched this one 2 times. This is a sweet and engaging film that, while it has the cliché character types and offers some frustrating moments, they're all forgiven for how unexpected it went and how it ends, with a warm and heartfelt message. 3 stars. The French Dispatch of the Liberty, Kansas Evening Sun. Wes Anderson's latest film is all around fine, with nice use of shots in black and white and color, fine music, fun edits, slight bits of humor, and a lovely 2D animated scene, all presented as a fine anthology with a magazine motif. 2.5 mixed stars. Lamb. From Iceland, the horror drama has moments of family bonding and fine effects, though it does end pretty bleakly and there's not much in terms of scares or feelings of simple likability, even for a film with a child that has the head and arm of a lamb. 2.5 mixed stars. Last Night in Soho. From director Edgar Wright, this horror mystery thriller is nice with its fun and engaging level of visuals, some good characters, and a neat soundtrack. Though at times some parts felt a bit obvious and occasionally silly, but they work fine enough. 2.5+ stars. Antlers. From director Scott Cooper and producer Guillermo del Toro, And based on the short story The Quiet Boy by Nick Antosca, this is a fine horror drama with some fine atmosphere and plenty of bloody effects and graphic imagery. But it's not that scary and plays more on the dramatic side than the horror side. 2.5 mixed stars. Eternals. Marvel's third film of 2021 is bland and maybe dull. While the action is fine and the visuals are neat and some of the ideas are okay, everything else felt like a mess, mostly for the story and how it's presented. 2.5 mixed stars. Clifford the Big Red Dog. The origin film based on the books of Norman Bridwell is about as generic as a family film can be, with only an occasional joke working, and it felt underwhelming with it being in live action and varying quality of effects. 2.5 minus stars. Red Notice. The Netflix action-adventure spy comedy is a fun one, with good laughs, fun action, and impressive drone work. But there's one too many twists involved, with the final twist and ending not having much to go off of. 2.5 plus stars. Spencer. Inspired by the life of Princess Diana, this is a decent film with fine performances, nicely done cinematography, lovely and ranging music, and a typical but fine story. 2.5 mixed stars. My Hero Academia the movie, World Heroes Mission. While I never read the manga or seen the show, I will say that this is a fine flick with fine characters and big action. Though its ending does drag on with so much action and dialogue and has a conflicting setup. 2.5 mixed stars. Belfast. From director Kenneth Branagh, this film set in Belfast, Northern Ireland during the riots of 1969 is wonderfully shot in both black and white and color, edited decently and well acted. Though it wasn't quite grabbing me as I expected it to. 2.5 mixed stars. Ghostbusters Afterlife. I saw this one 2 times, including one in IMAX. A serviceable sequel to the first 2 movies, yet has more relation to the original film as well as being more serious than funny, despite a few good and funny moments. Yet it's overall okay for being a bit different. 2.5 plus stars. King Richard. This sports drama on Venus and Serena Williams and their father is a nearly inspirational one on being successful without pandering to riches, and Will Smith does a good performance, especially with one scene that got me crying. 2.5 plus stars. House of Gucci. Ridley Scott's second film released for 2021, that's based on the book by Sarah Gay Forden on the Gucci fashion dynasty, isn't as interesting as I expected, despite a neat soundtrack, nice makeup, and fine casting. But its plot isn't flowing and it goes on longer than necessary. 2.5 mixed stars. Encanto. Disney's second animated film of 2021 and its 60th animated film is pretty underwhelming with its setup, obvious or nonsensical details, and a bit of a lame ending and mean-spirited moments. Though as forgettable as the songs are, they are visually fine. 2.5 minus stars. Resident Evil, Welcome to Raccoon City. Based on the video game series from Capcom, this film is an odd experience, with storylines and characters from the first 2 games going on at the same time, casting choices, stuff missing or backwards from the original games, and not as many thrills as it thinks it does, though the effects and gory violence are alright. 2.5 mixed stars. West Side Story. Steven Spielberg's remake of the 1961 movie that's based on the Stephen Sondheim musical is okay for its music, songs, and dancing, but being presented in a gritty-looking and dull setting doesn't match the upbeat tone of the songs. 2.5 mixed stars. Nightmare Alley. Guillermo del Toro's adaptation of the book by William Lindsay Gramson almost had me for its look and atmosphere and violent moments, but some parts felt like they went nowhere or are pretty questionable, and I expected it to be more like a noir thriller than what it is. 2.5 mixed stars. The King's Man. The prequel to the Kingsman films, that are based on the comics by Mark Millar and Dave Gibbons, does have some nice action and a bit of humor, even in reshaping World War I history and events during it. It doesn't have the same level of enjoyment as the first film, but it does fare a little better than the second film. 2.5 mixed stars. The Matrix Resurrections. I saw this one 2 times. While the 4th entry in the Matrix series isn't quite as fun as the others, it's still intriguing enough to get me thinking while being a semi-remake of the previous films and a continuation of the franchise. 2.5 plus stars. Sing 2. I saw this one 2 times. Illumination's sequel to the 2016 film is almost similar to the original, but the bigger production, new characters, animation quality, and new song renditions make it a nearly decent watch. 2.5 plus stars. Licorice Pizza. From director Paul Thomas Anderson, and set in 1970s San Fernando Valley, California, this comedy drama doesn't offer much laughs from me, though only little, and while there are bits of okay moments with the various characters and such, it almost bored me with its setup and scenes that went on. 2.5 mixed stars. Spider-Man No Way Home. Marvel's 4th film of 2021 is another okay one, but it's a bit enjoyable for being a crossover and having fun effects and action. Though the first act and ending wasn't quite to my liking, and the dramatic moments really didn't hit me. 2.5 plus stars. Now let's go on to the movies I saw on DVD. Barb and Star go to Vista Del Mar. What looks and feels like a lost SNL project is really a vibrant and original comedy with some nice jokes, fun characters, and a plot so bizarre that it would fit in an SNL movie. 2.5 plus stars. Judas and the Black Messiah. Based on the true events around William O'Neill and Black Panther chairman Fred Hampton, this film has its racial tensions and an okay setup, but it ends rather bleakly and somewhat left little impression on me. 2.5 mixed stars. Willy's Wonderland. This is quite an outrageous horror comedy in the spirit of Five Nights at Freddy's, with Nicolas Cage in a non-speaking role and some violent mayhem, but the reasons behind it all isn't as disturbing or interesting as Five Nights. 2.5 plus stars. And finally, let's look at the movies that I streamed. The SpongeBob movie, Sponge on the Run. I watched this one twice. The 3rd SpongeBob SquarePants movie is decent enough for its animation, nice jokes, and fun yet bizarre moments, but it does retrend familiar parts from previous movies and shows and has a predictable plot. 2.5 plus stars. Luca. I watched this one 2 times. Pixar's film that's a spin of The Little Mermaid and set in Italy is okay for its fine characters, nice setting, and soundtrack, yet there's an occasional predictable moment, story bits that could have had more of a punch to it, and could have been done on half land and half sea. 2.5 mixed stars. And now this time, it's going to be a top 5 list of favorite and least favorite movies of 2021. Here's the list of my top 5 least favorite films of 2021. And here's the list of my top 5 favorite films of 2021. So, that is it. Thank you for joining me. Like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Facebook or Twitter, support me on Patreon, and until next time for a new video.